Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are unraveling a truly fascinating mystery. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is literally leaking salt water from their eyes. And not because they got sand in them or, they're chopping onions, but because they feel deeply. It's a physical reaction to an emotional state. And here's the crazy part. It is a reaction that absolutely no other animal on Earth shares. Which brings us to a massive question. Why are humans the only creatures that cry emotional tears? Just think about it for a second. We share 98% of our DNA with chimpanzees, right? Yet they have never been recorded shedding an emotional tear. Dogs don't weep when they lose an owner. It's an act so incredibly unique to our species that scientists spent over 300 years just trying to figure out why only humans cry. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to look at the three types of tears, the chemistry of emotion, historical theories, the evolutionary signal, bust some animal and infant myths, and finally, look at the relief reality. Let's get started. Section 1. Three types of tears: basal, reflex, and emotional. Now, before we get into the why, we really need to understand the physiology of the eye, because, as it turns out, not all tears are created equal. You actually produce three completely different kinds of tears. First up are basal tears. These are constant. It's basically a thin film your body makes all day, every day, just to keep your cornea moist and protected. Next, we've got reflex tears. These happen when you cut an onion or get a face full of smoke. It's a purely mechanical defense response to wash out irritants. But finally, we have emotional tears. These aren't triggered by anything physical touching the eye at all. Instead, your brain decides, based purely on an internal feeling, to produce liquid and push it right out through your tear ducts. And that leads us to this precise definition. An emotional tear is a unique human tear triggered by an internal emotional state, like grief or joy, rather than physical eye irritation. I really want to emphasize this, because this specific definition hits on the exact phenomenon that makes us humans completely unique in the animal kingdom. Literally, nothing is attacking your eye. The entire response is coming from the inside. Section 2. The chemistry of emotion. Physical proof in the tears. To truly understand this, we have to look closer. Back in the 1980s, a biochemist named William Frey decided to see what emotional tears are actually made of on a microscopic level. And what he found was pretty fascinating: 21%. Frey basically collected tears from women, some who were chopping onions, and some who were watching sad films. When he compared them under a microscope, he found that the emotional tears contained roughly 21% more protein than the reflex tears triggered by an onion. But it wasn't just protein. Emotional tears actually carry a totally distinct chemical signature. They contain elevated levels of prolactin, which is a hormone linked to stress and nurturing behavior. They carry ACTH, a primary stress hormone, and, incredibly, they contain leucine and kethylene, which is a natural painkiller chemically similar to a low dose of morphine. So, emotional tears aren't just water leaking out. They literally carry a different chemical payload designed to help your body process stress and pain. How wild is that? Section 3. Historical theories. A 3,500-year-old mystery. Our ancestors were just as baffled by these tears as we are. And for thousands of years, humanity got the science completely, totally wrong. Ancient texts actually describe tears as a byproduct of the heart weakening and turning into liquid. By the time of Hippocrates, the theory shifted, and they started blaming the mind for producing tears. But my absolute favorite is from the 1600s. There was a popular theory that claimed strong emotion, like love, heated up the heart, creating this vapor that rose up through the body and cooled at the eyes. It sounds totally bizarre to us today, but for over a millennium, this was standard belief. It wasn't until 1662 that a Danish scientist named Niels Stensen dissected the eye and discovered the lacrimal gland. Science finally had the where, but the why remained a complete mystery. Section 4. The evolutionary vulnerability signal. The why of crying. So, to finally answer that 350-year-old why, we have to turn to modern evolutionary psychology, led by experts like Dutch psychologist Vingerhoets and evolutionary biologist Hasson. They started by looking at a glaring contradiction. Why evolve something that blurs our vision? Think about it. Crying doesn't improve your eyesight. It doesn't fight off infection. In a moment of intense danger or deep distress, having blur vision makes you incredibly vulnerable. Why on earth would evolution select for such an immense danger? Well, this brilliantly illustrates the leading theory. Because crying carries a real cost, reduced vision, visible vulnerability, it becomes a reliable signal that your distress is real and not performed. You see, you can't easily fake genuine tears on demand. Because it physically handicaps you, it acts as an honest, hard-to-fake social glue. In early human groups, this reliable signal told others, hey, I genuinely need help, ensuring that vulnerable members were quickly supported by the rest of the group. Section 5, Animal and Infant Crying Myths. Elephants and Babies. Okay, so if crying is an honest evolutionary signal for humans, how does that theory hold up against what we think we know about animals and babies weeping? Let's test this out. We've all seen those viral videos of elephants seemingly crying emotional tears after being rescued, right? Well, let's debunk that myth. Elephants definitely grieve, for sure, but their tears are structurally different. Elephants have inefficient nasolacrimal drainage, so during physical exertion, fluid that normally drains quietly just runs right down their face. Physiologically, it's pretty close to a basal tear. Human tears, however, are a brain-triggered emotional response with a completely distinct chemical composition. So just to be clear, elephants absolutely do mourn, but their visible tears are a structural drainage issue, not a confirmed emotional leak. Let's move on and see how this builds into human development. You might be surprised to learn that newborn infants don't actually produce tears for the first few weeks of life. Their tear ducts just aren't fully functional yet. But because a baby is too helpless to fake anything, their raw crying sound is already 100% believable to adults. Now, as toddlers and children learn to exaggerate, tears become moderately effective at eliciting sympathy. And as adults, well, we are highly capable of faking behavior. So our biology literally relies on hard-to-fake emotional tears as a necessary backup signal to prove we actually need sympathy. We literally grow into needing tears. Section 6. Does crying actually bring relief? The relief reality. We always hear that a good cry makes you feel better, right? Well, researchers conducted the international study on adult crying across 37 countries to finally answer if that's actually true. Public expectation is that 70% of people believe crying always helps, but the reality is actually much different. When researchers asked people how they felt immediately after crying, only about 50% genuinely felt better. The other 50% felt the exact same, or sometimes even worse. So, the crucial point is this. The emotional benefit of crying depends heavily on context. Crying alone tends to bring far less relief, while crying in the presence of a supportive person brings the most. Tears aren't actually designed to fix your mood directly. They're a signal. They're designed to bring supportive people closer to you, and it's that closeness that brings the relief. And that brings us to the end of our explainer. You know, crying is not a weakness, and it isn't a malfunction. It's arguably the oldest human trust system we have. Every other animal can express pain, but only humans learned to make it visible, honest, and impossible to hide. I want to leave you with this final provocative question to ponder. When was the last time you cried, and did it actually help you feel better? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Keep learning, and I'll see you in the next one.